The restaurant went completely silent the moment the young father leaped from his chair. Plates stopped clattering, conversations disappeared, and dozens of strangers froze as they watched a woman collapse near the entrance. For a few terrifying seconds, nobody moved. Nobody except one exhausted single dad who had already spent the entire day taking care of his little daughter. What happened next would change not only one woman's life, but the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Before we begin this unforgettable story, if you believe kindness still exists, that second chances can change lives, and that ordinary people can become heroes in extraordinary moments, please take a second to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us continue bringing inspiring stories that remind the world compassion still matters. Ethan Carter never imagined that the hardest part of becoming a father would come after he lost his wife. When cancer stole Emily away just 3 years after their daughter Lily was born, his entire world collapsed overnight. Friends promised they would always be there, relatives visited during the funeral, and neighbors filled the refrigerator with meals. But as weeks turned into months, everyone slowly returned to their own lives while Ethan faced every challenge alone. He learned to braid Lily's hair by watching online tutorials. He burned countless dinners before finally figuring out how to cook meals his daughter would actually eat. He worked long hours as a mechanic, rushed to daycare before closing time every evening, and stayed awake late into the night paying bills that seemed to multiply faster than he could earn enough to cover them. Every morning he smiled for Lily, even when exhaustion weighed heavier than sleep could ever fix. Money was always tight. Birthdays were simple. Vacations existed only in storybooks they borrowed from the local library. Yet Lily never complained. She saw her father as the strongest man in the world, the kind of hero who could fix broken bicycles, chase away monsters under the bed, and somehow make pancakes shaped like smiling bears every Saturday morning. Ethan lived for those smiles because they reminded him that even after unimaginable loss, life could still offer moments worth holding on to. One rainy Friday evening, after finishing another exhausting shift, Ethan decided to surprise Lily with dinner at a small family restaurant downtown. It wasn't expensive, but it was still a rare treat. Lily had earned top marks in school that week, and Ethan wanted to celebrate despite worrying about every dollar in his wallet. Watching his daughter laugh as she colored on the children's menu felt like a priceless reward. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to relax. The restaurant buzzed with life. Families celebrated birthdays, couples enjoyed quiet dinners, and elderly friends shared stories over coffee. Warm lights reflected against the windows while rain continued falling outside. Everything felt peaceful until a sudden crash shattered the calm. Near the entrance, a woman carrying several shopping bags stumbled violently before collapsing onto the floor. The bags scattered across the restaurant, sending groceries rolling beneath tables. Her face turned pale and her breathing became shallow. For a brief moment, everyone stared. Some stood halfway from their seats, others reached for their phones. Fear filled the room because nobody seemed to know what to do. Ethan reacted without thinking. Years earlier, while working at a community center, he had completed emergency first aid training. Those lessons had stayed buried in his memory until that instant. He rushed across the restaurant, carefully checking whether the woman was breathing while asking someone nearby to call emergency services immediately. He gently positioned her safely, monitored her breathing, and remained remarkably calm despite the panic surrounding him. His steady confidence gave everyone else permission to move. A waitress grabbed a first aid kit. Another customer brought a folded jacket to support the woman's head. Someone held back the growing crowd so she could have space. Little Lily watched everything from their table with wide eyes. Although frightened, she remembered something her father always told her whenever someone was hurting. Helping people mattered more than being afraid. Quietly, she picked up the groceries scattered across the floor, carefully placing fruit, bread, medicine, and flowers back into the torn shopping bags. Her small act of kindness touched several strangers who joined her without saying a word. Within moments, complete strangers worked together like lifelong neighbors. After several tense minutes, the woman slowly opened her eyes. Relief spread across the restaurant like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. Paramedics arrived shortly afterward, praising Ethan for keeping her stable until they reached the scene. As they prepared to take her to the hospital, the woman weakly looked around the room. Tears formed as she noticed dozens of strangers standing together, many silently praying for someone they had never met. Then the entire room went silent again. One of the paramedics quietly explained that the woman had likely collapsed because she had skipped meals while caring for her seriously ill husband. Financial stress and exhaustion had pushed her body beyond its limits. The shopping bags contained discounted groceries purchased with carefully counted coins. Even the flowers she carried were for her husband's hospital room because she wanted him to wake up to something beautiful despite everything they were enduring. Those words pierced every heart inside the restaurant. People who had arrived expecting an ordinary dinner suddenly saw something much bigger than themselves. They saw how invisible struggles often hide behind ordinary faces. The woman had smiled while paying for her groceries only minutes earlier. No one would have guessed she had been carrying so much pain alone. As the ambulance doors closed, something extraordinary happened. A middle-aged businessman quietly approached the restaurant manager and paid for every meal in the building. A young college student emptied the cash from her wallet into an envelope for the woman's family. The elderly couple sitting near the window offered to deliver meals during the coming weeks. The waitress who had served Ethan began organizing donations through the restaurant. Nobody asked who should start. Compassion simply spread from one person to another. Ethan tried slipping away quietly after finishing dinner, believing he had merely done what anyone should have done, but the manager stopped him before he reached the door. Every customer stood and applauded. Ethan's face turned red with embarrassment as Lily proudly hugged his leg. The applause wasn't only for saving a life, it was for reminding everyone that courage often begins with a single decision to care. News of the incident traveled through the community faster than anyone expected. Local newspapers shared the story. Social media posts praised the unnamed single father who refused to stand by while someone needed help. Eventually, neighbors recognized Ethan and began reaching out. Parents from Lily's school offered babysitting whenever he needed extra work hours. Local businesses donated school supplies. A mechanic from another shop even sent customers Ethan's way after hearing about his kindness. None of these gifts erased his struggles overnight, but together they reminded him he was no longer carrying life's weight entirely alone. Several weeks later, Ethan received a handwritten letter. It was from the woman he had helped. Her name was Sarah. She explained that doctors believed those first few minutes after her collapse had been critical. Because Ethan acted so quickly, she recovered completely and was able to continue caring for her husband, who had recently shown encouraging signs of improvement. She wrote that she had spent years believing the world had become cold and indifferent, but one evening in a small restaurant had restored her faith in humanity forever. Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Emily's old photograph. Looking at both, he realized something profound. Love never truly disappears. Sometimes it simply changes shape. The love he once shared with his wife now lived inside every lesson he taught Lily, every stranger he chose to help, and every act of kindness that inspired others to do the same. Lily grew up remembering that rainy evening not because her father became a hero, but because she witnessed ordinary people choosing compassion over indifference. She learned that real strength is not measured by money, fame, or power. It is measured by what someone does when another human being desperately needs help. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every interaction helps these stories reach more people who may need hope today. Special request: before you leave, comment with the words "Kindness changes lives" if you believe one compassionate act can create a ripple that reaches people we'll never even meet. Long after the applause faded and the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, the true miracle of that evening continued quietly. It lived in every stranger who decided to help instead of watching. It lived in a little girl who learned that courage begins with compassion. It lived in a tired single father who never expected recognition, only believing that doing the right thing was simply part of being human. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that we rarely know what burdens another person carries A smile, a helping hand, or a few moments of courage may become the turning point in someone else's story. In a world that often feels divided and hurried, kindness remains one language every heart understands, and sometimes one selfless act is enough to remind an entire room, and perhaps an entire world, that hope is still alive,